Good evening, everyone. I'm Rufen from Nobody Listens, and I have got someone more well known with me, which is Kevin Logan, without who I might not be making videos on YouTube at all because when I saw his videos, I was saying, "Oh, you can do this without putting too much effort into this, just for a good cause."
Well,
So
well, thank you. That's sort of a backhanded compliment. Like your videos were low grade enough that I thought, well, I can do that too. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Yeah. Well, but thank you, thank you.
um,
I'm glad my low effort video making inspired you.
And we have talked like ages ago once on here when there was the German election, when we
Yes,
did a thing with Chrissy Winters.
yeah, we did. And
And
you started talking about the German language, and I couldn't say
yeah,
anything.
and then we got back to that and actually had a 3 hour discussion about the German language after that.
Yes, I believe so. Ugh, but anyway, but I mean, it's okay because German politics is going really well. So that's super
Yeah,
awesome.
comparatively to everything else, we are actually doing quite well.
Well, compared to Britain, there are banana republics that are doing relatively well, to be honest. But there we go.
I wasn't actually thinking about Britain, but yeah, compared to Britain as well, of course.
Yeah,
I was thinking more along the lines of how far down the US and like Brazil have gone in the last few months and years.
yeah. The AfD haven't quite sort of taken over, which is good.
Yeah, which is really nice. They in some parts of Germany they're like the second biggest uh, fraction. Yeah, that doesn't translate word for word. The second biggest party when they are going to vote would be the AfD in some parts of Germany, but only some.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
And
you're always going to get some Nazis. Look, it sounds horrible to have to say that, but there are always going to be some elements of that. So you shouldn't necessarily strive for perfection, but if you can just keep them in check and allow civilization to do its thing,
yeah,
generally speaking, things will work out better. If that makes sense.
and I think the problem that the AfD created in Germany is that they are kind of uniting all the assholes under one banner.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
before that, we had like three Nazi parties that nobody voted for. And now all the Nazis moved to the AfD, and some people from other parties moved there as well.
yeah. Is there any element of a movement towards what they have in France, where the Front National have their, which is basically the equivalent of the AfD in France, but
Well,
whoever
we
wins.
have Pegida. We have Pegida, but we don't have like the Trashman movement, if you're
No,
talking about that.
no, no. Oh, yeah, but I mean more specifically in terms of electoral politics. Are the other mainstream parties as dedicated to keeping the AfD out of
Yeah,
those?
yes. Like
Yeah,
everyone is
yeah,
like that was a huge shock, and I don't know if you followed that after the German election. Uh, Nobody really could make a proper coalition.
yeah,
Like Jamaica didn't happen in the end,
yeah,
and instead now we have what is called a grand coalition again, which is the Christian Democrats, Merkel's party, and the second biggest party, the Social Democrats, working together,
yeah,
which is just over 50% together. Just
yeah.
weird.
Just well, that's good then, because I mean, in France, you've had really bizarre situations where you've had, say, the socialists asking you to vote for, Charles Chirac, the conservative, and you've had recently, of course, the conservatives and the socialists and even the communists saying vote for uh, uh, what's his name, the current president of France, whose name has totally escaped me. Um,
Isn't it
anyway,
still Hollande?
yes, Francois Hollande. In order to
By
keep.
the way, it took me ages to figure out that means Holland.
Oh, right, okay. Well,
Because I was getting my news mostly from the radio at the time, and I didn't get around to read as much, and so
yeah. Well, as centrist as he is, it was good to see that the I think they call it the Grand Coalition, not the Grand Coalition. That's what they call it in Germany. Um, where they, regardless of who gets through, if the Front National is the other party in the running for the presidency in the final round of voting, everyone votes against them, and that's I
Yeah,
think a really
that
important
would
strategy.
happen. That would happen in Germany as well,
Yeah,
because like the AfD is like so far on the right that they claim that Angela Merkel is like a secret communist, not even a secret communist, like all the fucking time.
yeah. Oh well, this this
And
this happens.
everything has moved so far to the right that sometimes I find myself on the same page as them because the AfD and Pegida, well, Pegida isn't really a thing anymore. So mainly the AfD have moved everything so far to the right that I'm
Yeah,
now suddenly on one page with fucking Merkel,
yeah.
which is
It's a
wrong.
bizarre thing, but I mean that's the if we and I certainly think there's some truth to saying that there are similarities. I don't think it's exactly the same, but there are similarities between the Europe of 2019 and the Europe of the early 1930s. There are definite similarities.
Yes.
Thankfully, the economics aren't anywhere near as bad, so that's why it's clearly not as bad as it was then.
And
Um,
especially over here, we have like a lot of things which keep such a thing in check because
yeah,
we learn from our mistakes.
yes, yeah, absolutely, and I think that was I think it's important that those structures stay in place. But more specifically, the reason I bring that comparison up is because one thing that became apparent during much of the sort of struggle against Nazism um, throughout that period was that you needed reasonable forces to stick together, regardless. Like, I mean, during the Second World War here in Britain, you had the Socialist Labour Party and the Conservative Party in a national unity government. So you had complete ideologically opponent people sat around the table for the good of the nation to defeat Nazism. Now, that kind of thing is not something you want in normal times because
No,
ideally you
but
want
it
certain
makes
things.
sense
But
in
we
war
don't.
times.
Yeah, exactly. But we don't live in normal times, and so reasonable forces aimed at the betterment of civilization need to stick together, even if we have disagreements. So, like, yeah, I don't like the fact that Angela Merkel is, to some extent, a conservative and stands for various things that I don't stand for. But
Like
she's not a
homophobic.
Nazi. Yeah, exactly. But she's not like an actual Nazi. So
Yeah,
I can
exactly.
work with her.
Exactly. Like she's the type of person who is herself homophobic but doesn't like um, punch down the new marriage legislation.
Mm. Well, exactly. Yeah, there's a difference between someone being. I mean, and I know they're not for a second overlooking homophobia or anything of the sort, but there's a difference between someone having a personal dislike based on religion or whatever, and someone saying, well, someone at least pretending to not say, but they are basically saying it, that gay people are going to be going into concentration camps and things, because we know that's where that ends up. So for me, I don't like the fact that she's homophobic, but if you give me a choice between her or an actual Nazi, I can work with her. Like you can talk to someone who isn't crazy. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah,
You
you
can't
can
negotiate
try
smart.
to
You
talk to
can't
people who are actually crazy, but
yeah. You can't
like, you
negotiate
can't
from a
solve things
position
with
of
them. Like you can
it,
talk to their audience,
yeah.
which you often said when you talk to like completely out there people, you don't talk to them because you want to convince them, but you want to be a reasonable voice in the ears of their listeners.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. I've
So
talked
that
with
is the
people.
only reason to talk to
Yeah, exactly.
people
Like
like
yeah,
them, I think.
yeah. But I mean, more. Yeah, that was I was referring strictly a second ago to electoral politics. But yeah, in terms of talking to them online, I will talk to pretty much anyone because, like, yeah, as you pointed out there, it's a point I've made several times. I'm not trying to convince, say, Richard Spencer to not be a Nazi because he has a vested interest in it. He's made a career out of it. He's not going to be changing his mind anytime soon. And like I say, there are always going to be people like that. But what we can do is by being reasonable in the face of their nonsense, their irrationality, their frankly evil, is hopefully win around people who might be tempted by that. hopefully, and ultimately, if it comes down to it, if stronger measures may be necessary. But for now, we're not in that situation, I don't think. And so, trying to win round more reasonable voices, even if it means winning them round to voting Conservative. Again, I can live in a world with a Conservative government. I don't like it. I don't think it's perfect by any stretch, but that's tolerable from the position of civilized humanity. Whereas the Nazis getting any kind of grip on power is not tolerable.
Yeah, and Germany, of course, moved from the Nazis to a conservative government, and
Mm,
that obviously was a huge move into the right direction.
mm.
And you can, that is the example where you can see that a right-wing government is preferable to a far-right dictatorial government.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't,
We had it here. You can just look at our history and see and compare the 1940s to the 1950s and see what is preferable. Even
oh,
though,
exactly, yeah. I mean, under the Nazis, and it's going to sound slightly, potentially a little cruel, but it's a point worth making. When you have Nazis in power, other countries will want to defend themselves, and we saw that German cities were laid waste. I mean, they were literally in ruins. No, that
yes,
didn't happen. That didn't happen with any conservative government in West Germany or in the reunified Germany, and it won't be happening because people don't want to bomb you. You're not a threat to them. You may not be friends, but you're not a threat. Whereas if you're a Nazi government, you are a threat and you need to be destroyed.
just by being a Nazi government, because at
Yeah,
some point that's going to be dangerous to other countries as well,
yeah.
no
It's. I mean
matter
that.
what certain people are
Yeah, that
wanting
was.
you to believe.
Yeah, that was the really
A fascist
stupid.
government is always a problem to everyone around, not just the country itself.
Yeah, exactly. That was the really stupid thing about what Candace Owens said about Hitler, was that there was no way in which he could ever have just stayed in his own borders. That's
Yeah,
not how fascism works,
and
obviously. So
also, and
it's
also the other thing about that is that very often, even like some reasonable people, there's a problem like that in the actual, actually really good graphic novel Mouse, is that people differentiate between Jews and Germans, even though there are and always have been German Jews.
yeah.
Like it's not like those things are mutually exclusive.
Well, exactly, yeah, and well, this is what they do. I mean, I was on someone else's podcast recently talking about this, and they rather sensibly said we're just making the point about um, Milo Yiannopoulos being white, and I had to point out to him that to a lot of Milo Yiannopoulos' friends, he's not considered white because he's, I believe, half Jewish, although albeit that he's a Roman Catholic in terms of his own beliefs. But because he's half Jewish, a lot of people on the far right would not consider him to be white. And when these far right idiots say that, you know, in order to be European, you have to be white, they also mean Jews can't be a part of that. And they're so transparent with their utter bigotry, their disgusting, nasty racism. Um, I don't see why more people can't grasp that so easily. It seems there's I've never quite understood the appeal. Look, I know how it works, but I've never quite understood it myself why that's an appealing uh, sentiment, if that makes sense. Because you know from your everyday life that regardless of whether someone has white skin or not, or whatever particular racial background or religious profile, you meet people of all kinds. That whether they be good people or bad people of all kinds. So the idea that, oh, well, the white people are brilliant and everyone else is shit is just obviously not true. And I would point towards white nationalists as the perfect example of that because they're white people who are fucking dreadful human beings. But
Yeah,
there we go.
only weird thing. Do something about your audio setup real quick.
What was that, sorry?
Your audio setup. I am echoing. I was echoing. I am not.
Oh, apologies. I'll turn you down because basically it doesn't. I don't know where my earphones are, but basically it's looping back. So in order to hear you, I have to have the volume on, and it's being picked up by the microphone. That happens sometimes. I don't know if that's a Germany thing because bizarrely, I do a regular series with a woman called Christy Winters, who, as you mentioned earlier, we were on a thing together ages ago, who lives in Germany. And it's only really you and her that I have ever had this problem with, it seems. Most people, so I don't know if there's like a German internet thing that makes it do that, or whether it's just coincidence or something. I
I
don't
think
know.
I think it's because she's the person you are on most with, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Like I'm kind of catching up on your stuff, but I've been also kind of avoiding all the drama stuff, and you guys do a lot of drama. So
yeah.
I'm
That show
not
is
everything, but I hear a lot of audio problems.
yeah. Well, she always says,
And they are all on the British side.
yeah, yeah. My internet is well, my internet's fine if like, and I'm going to get like a Ethernet cable. It's just when, say, for instance, I'm in because obviously I have the router for the wireless internet, the Wi-Fi in
Yeah,
my sort of front
for
living room. So if I'm doing it in my bedroom,
now,
well, the
for
back bedroom, spare
now
bedroom is quite
it's
far
good.
away.
So where the what I was trying to say before your audio broke is that of course the whole thing is a social construct, and therefore there are no real defined borders with race and stuff and religion.
Yeah, well,
So,
absolutely, yeah, yeah.
so I had no idea that there were people who wouldn't consider Milo white
Oh, yeah,
because
absolutely, because he's got
like to me
Jewish
the only
Jewish
thing is,
blood, you know.
do they look white? Okay,
Exactly. Well, that's
let's
the
say
thing.
be a white person.
I judge whiteness by like the color of someone's skin. If they have white skin, they're white. I mean, that really is it. Which means you get white Jewish people, but you also obviously get like black Jewish people and brown Jewish people and Chinese Jewish people. It happens, right? Um, Whereas for these people, they've got like this weird thing where, and also got a thing called the one drop rule, which is so bizarre because it would basically mean that no human being could ever actually be white. It's basically the idea that if you have any non-white blood in you whatsoever, you're not white. But we know for a scientific fact that everyone came from Africa. If you go back far enough,
It's
a
not
very
even
long time ago, yes.
basic
But
math.
pardon?
It's just basic math. Because if you take everything and then just do it times two times two times two times two, because adding all the parentage,
Yeah.
at one point that's everyone in the world who ever existed. And so, of course, everyone has one drop of whatever blood in them.
Well, exactly. Yeah, we know that humanity came from the Great Rift Valley of Africa. So, I mean, those people would not have been white. We don't. To be fair, we don't have photographic evidence of that, but I'm pretty sure they were not white folk. I'm pretty sure they were black, right? Um, so the idea that you don't have you have like pure white blood is a it's a lie. Basically, it's a total lie. No one has, and that, by the way, that's fine. I don't know why anyone would have a problem with that. You are who you are. You don't choose any of this. No one chooses to be black or white or have Jewish parentage or whatever. No one chooses that. So why you would judge someone for it, I don't know. It's so well, it's evil, frankly, is what it is. Let's just be brutal about it.
Yep. Uh, but I think we are actually there what I originally wanted to talk about, a few things with like you, who is, I would say, a very moral atheist. Like
Yes.
you think a lot of stuff with morality and ethics and shit, and by religious or non-religious persuasion, you are an atheist. So one thing I've noticed that I wanted to talk to someone like you about is that on YouTube there seem to be a lot of atheists who have the problems of organized religion,
Mm.
which is all like the sexism and homophobia and shit like that, but without it being like from ages ago.
Yeah.
Any idea why?
Um,
What
I'm,
is
I, I can't speak to exactly why, but it's certainly something I've also noticed that they've kept a lot of the bigotry and hatred towards certain things, although they try and mask it more in scientific terms and things. But they've kept all of the bigotry. They've just dropped the God element of religion. But they've kept like, oh well, this is our tribe and this is your tribe, and women are second class, and homosexuality is evil. A lot of them have kept that horrible nastiness. Although, like I say, they will dress it up in more socially acceptable language. But they've kept the bigotry. They've just dropped God. So they're essentially um, literally just removing God and becoming atheist. But they've kept the nastiness, which is a shame because I found it one of the most freeing things ever. When I like to think of it as escaping Catholicism, but that's not an attack on any Catholics, if you happen to be one.
no?
Um,
Of course you can. I'm not a Catholic either, but I know people who are actually happy being Catholic. So I
yeah,
don't.
absolutely.
Neither of us is judging anyone who will
Yeah,
watch. Who
yeah,
is,
absolutely. And I've said this before, it's bizarre, but as an atheist, I can safely say that the most brilliant human being I ever knew, the most moral, brave, upstanding human being I ever knew, was actually a Catholic priest in my youth, bizarrely, which is a very strange thing to have to say because obviously in recent times we've heard some stories of Catholic priests who were maybe not quite as moral, but
yeah,
there we
but
go.
it's also always nice to hear like different stories and see that there is like next to no group of people which is entirely evil.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Of course, no group like that is a monolith. There's a point I've made before about the Islamophobia that exists, certainly in online atheism, but also within religious communities as well. Is that the idea that Islam or Muslims as one thing do or believe or act in certain ways all together is ridiculous because that would mean that what the civil wars that rage throughout Arabia and the Middle East and in Persia are internecine wars within Islam. So clearly they're not a monolith. They don't all believe the same things. They don't all practice the same way. Um, some of those things are more tolerable than others, to my mind, um, in terms of their belief structures. But they're clearly not one group. You can't say Muslims believe X because clearly not all Muslims do believe the same thing.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that everyone is complaining that there are too many Muslims in Europe now, but
Mm.
they don't seem to notice like differences between them.
Yeah,
Like, for
absolutely. Yeah,
example, how much of their hair women of which age cover up, which is like fairly a fairly obvious difference between women from Turkey, women from Africa, and women from like Syria in terms of when and how much they cover up.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There are huge differences, and I mean, there are groups even not to make it necessarily even geographic, but there are things like the group, the Ahmadiyya, I believe, who are incredibly. They're a reformist Islam group, and they're very, very peaceful, and I mean, far more peaceful even than like the non-Muslims here in Britain. They're far nicer people actually than the vast majority of British people I've ever met. Um, and so clearly they're very
And
different to say
again,
ISIS. They're the
British
exact opposite
people
of
are
ISIS.
like the complete opposite of what non-British people think you guys are. Like
Hmm.
once I've actually been there,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
like
And
you
this is
are
my
some rude motherfuckers.
yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of atheists, and it's not the worst thing about the anti-theist people. Although no, you don't have to be horrible to be an anti-theist, of course. But the worst thing about the online and anti-theist, as opposed to just atheist, the people who actually really, really despise religion, is the rudeness of essentially like there's this trope, this meme that goes through it where they'll say belief in God is a mental illness. Now, to say that is disgusting on a couple of levels. Firstly, the vast majority of people that have ever existed have believed in a God. They weren't clearly all like mad or whatever. And secondly, um, you're shitting on people who are mentally ill. You're basically saying that they're in like you're equating them with irrationality or whatever, when it's just not fair. You're being kind of ableist and against the majority of people who have ever lived and who will live now. Most people in the world still believe in some form of a god, even if it's like a deist personal god or whatever. The idea that all of those people are mentally ill is a really disgusting thing to say. I don't know why you would be bigoted towards such large numbers of people in that way. It's really disgusting, and of course means that those people aren't going to listen to you. So it's counterproductive in the long run.
Yeah, I kind of don't.
So I was just going to ask: are you a religious man yourself?
Yeah, I am.
Do you
There's
mind telling me
actually
what
a notice somewhere
denomination?
there should be like a little cross hanging there.
Yeah.
I'm like a Protestant, but I don't go to church that often, and always when I go, um, I I think like, holy shit, how come our religion has such a bad service?
Yeah. So is that like
Like
Lu-
we need to do something.
so is that Lutheran Protestantism?
Yeah, Lutheran and Protestant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fair enough. I always interested to find out about people in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have been looking a lot into the works of Dr. Bart Ehrman, who I know because of Chrissy Winters. I
Yeah.
don't know if you know who that is.
Yeah. Is it the mythicist?
No, no, it is someone who has been to Mississippi Milwaukee as like one of the strongest atheist defenders of the historical Jesus.
Oh, so he's okay. Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. So he's an anti-mythicist.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough. Well, I mean, I happen to, yeah, I'm with him because I don't think he was the son of God, because I don't think God is a thing. But I'm more than happy to believe that there was a person broadly fitting the description in the Bible
Yeah,
that.
I always think that the like um, the weird thing about mythicists, I don't know if this makes sense. They are if they are saying that Jesus didn't exist and are uh, so interested in keeping that fact up,
Hmm,
doesn't that mean that their whole belief system would fall down just because Jesus existed? They seem to be very, very interested in, like, keeping this up, and people like you can just believe that Jesus was like some rabbi from the first century, and you
yeah.
can go about being an atheist because you just don't believe in God. But
Yeah, exactly.
please,
That's the
you
bizarre thing. It clearly flies in the face of what evidence we have, and obviously the evidence is incomplete either way. But the evidence seems to suggest that some person fitting that description existed, and you can still be an atheist and believe that this historical person existed, in the same way that I can believe that Alexander the Great existed, but I don't think he was a god. Like it doesn't mean anything. You don't have to like tear down the story in order for that story to not necessarily be the story of a god.
yeah,
It's
and you know, I accept the existence of Siddhartha Gautama and Mohammed, and
yeah,
I'm neither a Buddhist nor a Muslim,
yeah,
so
exactly.
I
Yeah,
just don't get it.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, people may believe the stories in the Bible, but I can accept that this person existed and still say, well, I don't think he could actually walk on water. That's like an exaggeration that people put in there because they believed he was God, and so they sort of they bigged him up. They put a positive spin on the story to make him more impressive, and that's fine and makes perfect sense. That's what you would expect, right? To a degree, given the story, the time that he existed in, where those kind of magical stories, religions were being set up left, right, and centre at that time.
Yeah, and of course we now live after like the 18th century, the 19th century. We live in a very literal time where it's not only religious stories, it's also like fairy tales and shit have gone, and legends have gone way down in importance, and like realism has gone way up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Like
So
and
sometimes I think we have a hard time understanding like old stuff because we are so used to a more literal way of communicating.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think that kind of realism has taken some of the beauty out of storytelling and things. And I mean, like I say, I don't have to accept that it's the teachings of a god, but I like some of the parables in the Bible. I think they're actually good teachings that you can live a decent life by. But again, that doesn't challenge the idea that I think this was just a person telling these stories. It doesn't have to have been a god. It can just be, oh well, this was actually a good thing to teach. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
of course, and there are a lot of people. I know that there are people who complain about this because it's half understood Eastern stuff from a white perspective. But of course, there are like a lot of European people who take like snippets from Eastern religion
yeah.
without like
Yeah.
having any connection to the religion at all. But
Yeah.
it works out for them.
Yeah, and that's ultimately why I don't shit on religious people, because if life can be fucking difficult, life can be really difficult, and if you found a way by believing in Jesus or Muhammad or fucking Vishnu or whoever, whatever god or gods you believe in, if that helps you get through your life without fucking killing yourself or killing other people, good. Good for you. As long as you're not trying to force your beliefs on anyone else or trying to make legislation to mean that gay
Yeah,
people can't get
which
married
are
or
the
whatever.
like the two biggest problems.
Yeah, exactly. But as long as they're not doing that, if you can believe whatever the fuck you want, I don't. It's not a problem for me. Just live a decent life. Don't force your shit on other people, and you can believe that fairies live in your fucking basement. Good for you. I don't care. That's your business.
So the point I wanted to make about what Erman is doing, he right now he is having a debate with like a biblical literalist,
Hmm.
and I was just thinking, like, if you are that, obviously that makes the problem we talked about earlier with all the homophobia, which even comes in if you leave God out of the equation, worse because you still have a lot of the homophobia and anti-women stuff that is in the Bible. But um, like, why would you today see old religious texts as if someone wrote them now? It just makes everything worse for everyone, for people who fall outside of your default, and also for you, because now you have like a lot of internal problems, most likely.
Um, I'm not entirely sure I know what the point you're making there is.
I that doesn't really matter. I was just like powering up what you said about I don't even remember anymore. And my point about this the understanding having changed with
Oh yes,
in
okay, yes. No, I'm with you. Absolutely, yeah. Um, yeah, I think. I mean, one Christianity was to some extent forced by secularism to have to change, but I think the fact that they have, and the fact that you've got now most churches, even if they might, again, as with Merkel, they might have their personal issues with homosexuality, but they don't stand in the way of progress. Good. That's awesome. Okay. Again, that, I can live with that. If someone wants to believe a nasty thing, I'd prefer they didn't. But as long as they don't really act on it, then okay, I can live with that. Yeah. So yeah, the interpretations of these things have changed vastly. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, and maybe I completely misunderstand this, because I'm not a scholar, and because I'm not a Jew, I'm not that familiar with the Pentateuch, which is the five books of Moses, which has one of like the most famous anti-homosexual stuff in there. The passage everyone, like Mike Pence, is quoting is more misogynist than homophobic, actually. because it means don't act like a woman.
Yeah,
It,
you would not. I don't know what the German would be, but in English it's uh, you should not lie with a man as you lie with a woman. If you do, both of you have done something that is abominable, and you must be
yeah,
put to
and
death.
what it means is the that a lot of passages see women as incomplete men, and that means and so sleeping with a man means making him incomplete.
Yeah,
So
and it's
it's
bizarre because that's so. It's yeah,
sexist
it clearly comes from a scientifically less advanced civilization because or time in history because
because
we now
I
know that
found
from embryology that it's
yeah
actually men that are incomplete women. So essentially,
I
men stop developing in the womb as and
I
then don't go on to
put it
become
another way, but
women.
sure.
Yeah, literally that's why we say men have nipples, for instance, even though we don't need them. It's because you start off developing into a woman and then cease to develop and stay and become a man and grow male genitalia in the womb. So a man is literally an incomplete woman. And again, there's nothing wrong with that because no one's choosing any of this. It just happens. It's just chemicals. It's fine. Hello? Did I cut out there?
Yes,
Oh, apologies.
and
Where
now
did
I'm
I get
echoing.
to? Where did I get to?
You were explaining the that girls develop a bit further in the womb.
Yeah, yeah. All fetuses, human fetuses, start off developing as women, which, like I say, is for why men have nipples. Even though we don't need them, they're not useful in any sense whatsoever. But then you stop developing and become a man, or you develop further on and become a woman with reproductive capabilities internally yourself, which is that's how it works. So men are incomplete women from an embryological point of view. But again,
I'm
that's not
already
that's
when you upload this to to your channel, and
yeah,
YouTube
this is
gets hold of this. It's gonna
yeah.
be amazing.
Well, that's the thing, but I'm not making a value judgment there because, again, no one's choosing any of this. And of course, you need um, both a sperm and an egg to make another life. So there's no, like, it's not like one's more or less important or more or less worthy. It's just a thing, it's just chemicals interacting. And it's what we do with the life that comes from that that means anything. That's what really matters. But yeah, the
That
men's rights movement can suck my dick. I mean, I really don't care. Yeah.
yeah, like I was thinking like a few months uh, back when two things like happened at once. One thing was like I was talking a lot to a friend who is transgender, who I met thinking that they were a girl, but they are actually a man. And
Right.
I was like slowly realizing that I'm intersex. And then but like I'm a cis man. I was raised as a man. I have the parts. I'm just not like completely uh, you know what I mean, right? I'm not good with science, with the hard sciences. This is not my
Okay, so
thing.
you're intersex, yeah?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I grew up as a boy and I'm a man. But so I was just thinking if I just woke up as a woman one day, I could just deal with it because I don't really care too much,
Yeah.
honestly, and I don't know why so many guys are so hung up about their gender online
Well, that's
and
well, it comes.
making a judgment on other people's gender and gender identity because I honestly don't give a fuck about mine. I think I could manage either way.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, I know exactly where it comes from. It's the toxic masculinity of hating women, of thinking of women as lower. So
Yeah, and
if they have any elements of femininity to their personalities, that would make them lesser in their own minds because they so think of women as lower creatures. So that's
And
exactly
if
where it comes from.
that is the question, if you move away from religion, what point is there in thinking this anymore?
Yeah. In essence, because we still hold on as a society to the rigid gender norms that were initially imposed by those religious feelings, you're sort of brought up to believe in the same things, even if you're unaware that they come from a religious place. So people still stick to that stuff because it's easy to understand for them. Like thinking about gender as being a more fluid, changeable thing is much more complicated and scary. Whereas thinking of it as fixed, this fixed idea that if you have a penis, you're this, and if you have a vagina, you're this, and nothing can possibly change. There's no element of difference, no element of similarity or crossover. There's no, that's really easy to understand. You don't have to think about that. That's just there. So it's essentially intellectual laziness and cowardice dressed up as concern about um, degeneracy or whatever the word they want to use today is.
I'm actually amazed they still use that word because everyone has told them where that comes from.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, yeah,
Uh,
but I mean, they still use cultural Marxist, and it comes from exactly the same place. So
yeah,
they
but
don't.
at least they rephrased it. At least they rephrased it. They've been to thesaurus.com once.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But I mean, that. Yeah, that's. But yeah. But is there anything more? Because I'm fat, and therefore I'm hungry. So
yeah, it's not even that late for you.
no, it's not that late for me, but I do like to eat every 10 to 15 seconds if I can. So I might do
You
that.
should probably feed your cat.
Yeah.
And
I,
I wanted to make one comment to what you just said and ask you a question that I have forgotten now. But oh yeah, I remember the question. So what you said was by religion, and that the hatred had come up by religion, and I was gonna correct it to with religion because the bigotry and the religion rose at the same time. I think when humanity was trying to figure itself out,
yeah. Okay,
and
that's a fair
by religion
correction. Yeah.
maybe sounds a bit too
That's
harsh.
that's a fair correction, and thank you for correcting me in a second language, which makes me feel even more stupid.
I teach this shit. Sorry, I think
Yeah,
about language all the time. It's what I do. I
yeah,
spent most of today with teaching some guy with a learning disability English and going over English and German with refugees. So it's just what I do.
that's
And
fair.
the other thing is, uh, do you have like we just listed problems today?
Hmm.
Do you have actually any idea on what to do?
I have a fair idea, and it's broad because I don't actually have like the power to be able to implement them. So I haven't looked into the practicalities. Well,
Obviously
no,
not.
I know about the
If
practicalities, but
we
I
were doing something that actually mattered today, um, we would have invited some people with some actual power. And
yeah.
obviously, this is very much to white cis men solve sexism and racism. So
Yeah, well, I think the world will be
we are
perfect after this conversation. Yeah,
some
absolutely.
ideas.
Um, yeah, but in terms of how to implement them, I'm not entirely sure. But essentially, the way you steal um, the power of bigotry in the public discourse is not by necessarily taking on the people spreading it so much, although that is an important part of it as well, but actually draining it of its cultural power by giving people better life chances. So, for instance, if people in downtrodden areas, like for instance, it's no coincidence that the AFD do well in, say, former East German parts of the now reunified Germany because they're poorer areas, right? When you've got no hope, there's no point voting for moderation, because you're not getting moderate anything. You're still going to get nothing, right? So what you do is you ensure that those people have better housing, better educational opportunities for their children, better workplace conditions, better pay, um, better life chances in general, right? If And it doesn't necessarily even have to be like, oh, the state has to step in and do X, Y, and Z, right? But just even the kind of social democratic model of a kind of managed, ethical quote unquote capitalism can do this, right? It doesn't have to be like outright socialism, but if you make the world a fairer, better place for the poorest and most downtrodden in a society, then you drain the swamp of hatred, because those people they have something to lose by voting for extremists. Whereas when they've got nothing to lose. So they might as well vote for the extremist, because where has not voting for the extremist got them? They're still poor, their kids have got no chance, crime's still going through the roof. So actually, if you take away those problems, you give them something to lose, they're more likely to vote for a moderate option, because those moderate options will at least keep the little they have in society. Does that make sense?
I wasn't prepared for that. That is actually really, really good.
Thank you.
Like, where the fuck did that just come from?
Well, that's essentially what I'm trying to get at. Like, I personally think that socialism in its totality would be a better way of going, but I realise that's not for everyone. But it doesn't have to go that way in order to stop Nazism. You just make life tolerable for poorer people, and Nazism isn't really that big of an issue anymore. The Nazis came to power because people were starving. So if you make sure they're not starving, you make sure they've got good housing and opportunities, the Nazis melt away.
Yeah, because the Nazis propose the wrong solutions to real problems. And
Yeah,
if you just
they give you easier
keep the
again.
problems out in other ways,
Yeah, as with the gender thing,
in ways that
they're
actually
giving you
work,
they're giving you easy answers that aren't correct, but they're easy
exactly.
to understand. And so if poorer people, and especially, this is going to sound rude, but less educated people, are offered simple solutions that they can understand, and they've got no reason to vote for a moderate option, it's the perfect breeding ground for Nazism to flourish. So remove that breeding ground. It's very simple.
Yeah.
But
And with
unfortunately,
that, I'm
governments
gonna
across the
leave
Western
you
world are
for
more than
your
happy to shit on
uh,
poor people so that corporations can make billions. And whilst we still have those kind of governments in power, Nazism can't be crushed.
and now I missed what your actual point, and you missed my fat shaming joke. So should we leave it at that and let the viewers figure out which one they want to listen to more?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough.
Because I don't think any of us have anything more to say. I'm sure we will hang out again sometime. And oh, what do you have coming up on your channel that people
Lots of
might want
hangouts.
to check
Lots of
out?
hangouts. Is it too late past the World Cup to gloat about Germany going out in the group phase? Is it
And
too
no, it's funny, and it's also funny that this is the third time in a row that the world champion got kicked out in the group phase.
Yeah, that
This
is
has
bizarre, isn't it? Because you'd think they'd be really good, but it's
yeah.
difficult to replicate, isn't it? The time afterwards, very difficult. But there we go. Anyway, yeah. So in terms of what I've got coming up, loads of stuff. Saturday I'm doing a thing with a British transgender YouTuber, who the Cognitive Society put me onto, and I've totally forgotten her name. Apologies, but that will be on my channel at 6 p.m. Saturday. Then Sunday, Let Them Eat Cake, which is a show I do with the Cognitive Society and Mike Stutchbury, which is 7 p.m. on Sunday. And then a nice treat, actually, a big YouTuber, Mexi, will be on my channel on Tuesday. We're going to analyse the Slavoj Zizek versus Jordan Peterson debate.
Oh, that sounds like fun. I will actually watch
Yeah,
that.
cool. So what have you got coming up on your channel now? You can live
Right
stream.
on my channel, Basically, I want to get back into making music here again, and I'm finally going to write the video about how to deal with history. I have been shopping around for a year at this point. Like when I got out of the hospital the last time, I started working on it, and I got sidetracked by so many things. And now every time I'm actually writing, I'm working on my novel instead. So it might, but I think it's going to be here. Like, you know what? I'm live. I'm going to just push myself through it. I'm going to say it live here. This thing is going to be out by the end of next month, and at least the English version. There's also going to be a German version later, and I can guarantee you that it's going to be well researched, and that is going to piss a lot of people off.
Well, I look forward to it. I especially
Yeah,
look forward to the German version because I won't be able to understand that one. So,
I'm going to do the English version beforehand, but some people asked me to do an English version, and some people are actually like teachers and shit.
hmm,
So that might be interesting.
okay. Well, like I say, I look forward to it. That sounds
Yeah,
it.
thank you. And I look forward to your stuff as well. I actually don't know the trans YouTuber probably because it's not ContraPoints. You wouldn't have
Yeah,
forgotten her name. And so I probably don't
it's
know
not.
her.
It's not ContraPoints, but I have had Contra on my channel. She's
I
very
know I saw that.
yeah.
I saw that. And like you said, a huge YouTuber called Maxi or something. I don't know them.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, they're not as big as ContraPoints, but they're quite big in kind of lefty circles. She's good. She's a Canadian uh, eco vegan socialist, I suppose you might describe her as. But yeah, so she's very good, and we're going to be taking a look at the Zizek Peterson debate and probably talking about some other things. So yeah,
Yeah,
thank you for having me on.
it will take some time, won't it? It was like 3 hours or something.
No, well, we're not going to like play through the whole thing. We're going to kind of do more, just taking a general look at it and maybe playing some clips from it.
Have you seen
Otherwise,
it?
pardon?
Have you seen it? Like
Yes,
the whole thing?
yeah, it was
Is
dreadful.
it?
it was, it was. I mean, Zizek took him to task on a few things, which was good, but he agreed with him far too much. And Peterson,
Uh,
it's just typical Peterson, word salad. No, it doesn't mean anything. It's just,
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I didn't know about these people like when I was like 15.
mm,
Because I'm like the um, uh, pseudo smart asshole who has a lot of personal issues, who would have fallen right into the trap of someone like him or even
yeah.
of Carl. I'm
Well, so,
afraid.
what you described there was every 15-year-old ever. That's exactly what 15-year-olds are, and that's fine. But unfortunately, Peterson is taking advantage of those innocent young people, and that's not cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think people should just know better because I remember how it is being like 15 and unsure about myself and disabled, and it's really enough. No, it's just assholes take advantage of teenage boys, honestly. And I'm not just talking about the Catholic Church. I'm also talking about Peterson and TJ and Carl and whoever is on right now. I don't know the new names yet.
That yeah, those that people I think get the idea from the names you mentioned there. They're kind of the pricks preaching to, like you say. I mean, just they're innocent young people. They might be. Well, they're not. There's not. They might be. They are pricks, but everyone was when they were 15.
Yeah,
I
they
mean,
just want to make them into bigger pricks, I
have
think.
you ever like been to a school? It's awful. It's full of 15-year-olds. They're horrible, but they're 15. You let them alone. That's what you like, to their children. Anyway.
Yeah, honestly, they should just get their own YouTube and their own Facebook, their own Twitter, and just move on to the real thing when they are grown up.
Mm,
There was
absolutely.
something like that in Germany, but it's closed down now, where there was this thing called Schülervz for like students in schools and StudiVZ for students in colleges. So you had like 2 times the German Facebook, which was neat.
Oh, cool.
But everyone just used it to play a farming game.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
And with that, I think we're actually gonna leave you. And yeah,
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This was a nice
no
talk.
problem. Thank you for being on.
Yeah.
Till then,
Goodbye.
bye.